Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll get started in just a minute. We'll just let people come in here. Thank you all for joining. We'll be starting in just a second. We just want to let some more people get here. Okay, hello and welcome. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and I will be your host for today's webinar, our first of 2023. Cancer and Careers is a national nonprofit and the only program of its kind solely dedicated to empowering and educating people with cancer to thrive in their working environment. And we do so via a comprehensive website, free publications, and career coaching. Additionally, we offer educational seminars targeted at employees with cancer and their colleagues with healthcare providers, and certainly employers and caregivers can benefit from all this information as well. To stay informed of these programs, please sign up for our newsletter if you're not already by visiting cancerandcareers.org, where you can also access all of our programs free of charge. Now, before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items related to accreditation. And for those of you who don't require this information, please bear with me. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. Today's webinar is accredited by ANCC, ASWB, the New York State Education Department State Board for Social Work, the California Board of Registered Nursing, and the Society of Human Resource Management. If you plan on requesting continuing education credits for this program from any of these accrediting bodies, please proceed with the following steps. First, you must log in individually. Participants who listen in on someone else's line will not receive credit. Second, you must complete and submit the evaluation and post-test, as well as receive a passing grade of 80% or higher on the post-test. Following today's session, you'll receive an email with all of this information. That email will be sent no later than 5 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, January 26th, and certificates will be emailed within 4 weeks. Also, please note that the planners and presenters of this program have not disclosed any pertinent financial relationships or conflicts of interest, and that no commercial support was provided for this program. Now, thanks in part to Genentech and QVC, Cancer and Careers is able to offer this 9th year of the Balancing Work in Cancer webinar series. This program was created to provide patients and survivors, as well as their care teams and employers, with concise, targeted information about the work-related issues that arise after a cancer diagnosis. Additionally, we'd like to recognize Cancer and Careers' year-long sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing all resources and services free of charge. Now, for most people, workplace stress is a given. Adding cancer into the mix, and it can sometimes become debilitating, but we're here to help you think about your priorities and how you can balance your job, family, and own well-being to avoid letting stress get the best of you. And leading today's webinar is a longtime Cancer and Careers collaborator, supporter, Julie Larson. Julie's a licensed social worker with her own private practice. Prior to that, she was the young adult program director at Cancer Care and continues to work closely with the adolescent and young adult cancer community. She is nationally renowned speaker in the AYA cancer space and has been featured in numerous publications, including Self Magazine, Coping with Cancer, and Cure Magazine. And it is my pleasure to welcome Julie Larson.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Scott, for that lovely intro. It is my pleasure and honor to be here with you today. We are going to talk about a lot of different things today as it pertains to taking care of yourself and more importantly, your mental health. If you are sitting somewhere and you have access to a pen and a paper, please grab it. Grab anything that you can scribble on, because I just think that there might be something. My hope is that there's something that resonates with you and that you can jot that down and circle back to it later. I'm going to ask you at certain points within this next hour together to sit back and really think about yourself and like kind of a 30,000 foot view, observe, and to kind of think back to times when you have felt stress. And I'd love it if you kind of make some notes on those things too, a little bit of homework as we go. I am also totally okay. And in fact, encourage and empower you to use that chat. So if there are things that are coming up for you as I begin to talk and you want to comment or you want to ask, put that in the chat. I will certainly leave some space and some time at the end of this hour for us to ask questions. And so there is also the Q&A you'll notice in your toolbar. There's one that says chat and there's one that says Q&A. Chat and connect and put your thoughts out there in the chat. If there's a specific question that you have for me, please log that over there in that Q&A. And Scott is going to be paying close attention to that and help me sort through those things. We will try to get to some of those, probably not all, but some of those at the end of this talk. Okay, let's get started. So here's just kind of a little bit of a roadmap of where we're going to go over the next bit. What triggers my stress? And honestly, I know this is managing stress in the workplace, but if I'm being completely honest with you all, this is just managing stress, period. And yes, I am aware that there are some differentiating factors to caring for yourself when you are in a professional setting. And we will talk about that. But I think all of this begins in some ways in a very similar foundational way. So understanding yourself is key wherever you're managing your stress. So what triggers your stress? How do you uniquely and personally recognize your own stress when you're feeling it? What do you do with it? And how can you build resilience? Okay. I usually start all of my talks and even sometimes the sessions in my office with just a reality check moment. I think that this, and we're going to call this reality check in some ways a exercise in self-compassion, because sometimes people walk into my office and they feel quite worried that the way in which they're coping, their overwhelm, their kind of numbness, perhaps their emotional fragility, their irritation and impatience, whatever it is that they're experiencing and they're struggling with, they're worried that in some ways they're not doing something well, or they could be doing it better, or something's amiss, or off kilter for them. And I said, freeze, let's just for a moment do a self-compassion reality check and put everything that's going on in your world today on the table. So that taking inventory of the stresses in your life. So that might be your cancer diagnosis and ongoing treatment. It might be post-treatment follow-up. It might be changes in your physical body that you're becoming increasingly aware of over time. It may be relationships that have changed and are tricky. It may be things outside of the cancer sphere, like, your rent check and all of your bills, and the fact that your kitchen is a total disaster this morning when you left, or the fact that you didn't sleep at all last night, or all the other things, so we're just going to put that all on the table. In addition to that, we're going to put your wiring, right? Some of us are just genetically prone to be worriers, right? Like it's part of what you got. You didn't have any control over that, but some of it is how you're wired and how you think and how you react to situations. So we're going to put that on the table. The point being is that when we take inventory of this, my guess is a good lot of it is outside of your control. You didn't design this moment, right? And so in some ways, the way in which you're feeling makes a heck of a lot of sense and is understandable. And so that helps us to move into that heart little bullet there of just be honest and kind with yourself. You didn't ask for this. This is where we are. Let's bookmark this day and say, hey, January 25th is feeling kind of crappy, kind of hard. I'm really spinning with a lot of questions. I'm finding it hard to move forward. And those feelings might change over time. So we kind of check in. And then on the other hand, we're going to give ourselves grace for feeling that way. But we're also going to take some responsibility for caring for yourself. So it's a little blend of both, kind of that self-compassion of goodness. Gosh, it makes sense why I'm struggling or what's not working, but also where do I have control and what am I going to do about it? What's within my realm, or what can I do? So that moment of reality check sometimes kind of level sets and takes away that shame and blame that we can get into. A diagnosis of cancer can have us reeling for so very many reasons. It's information overload, right? When you think of that moment that you sat in the doctor's office and you heard that word cancer, it was sent you immediately and almost suddenly and unexpectedly on a trajectory of having to understand and answer a lot of questions that you were in many ways not prepared to deal with. So there's a lot of information overload, whether that's your diagnosis and medical questions, but it's also what am I capable of? What can I do as I return to work or continue working? What are my options? So many different things. Who do I talk to? Who do I not talk to? Who's going to be able to be supportive to me and who's going to fall off the cliff? Like a lot of different things are beginning to kind of spin there. A lot of questions we don't know. It's a lot of information to kind of gather. There's uncertainty about your commitments to work and to your family. We don't know what you're able to do. There might be a desire to continue, but we don't quite know. You might be wanting to pull back, but you're unsure what you can and can't do. Emotional conversation, certainly this diagnosis brings up a lot of conversations that can be tricky to navigate. There's fear and uncertainty about the future. It feels really difficult to plan and really difficult to look forward because not only is that hazy and unclear, but it might also be filled with feelings of fear and worry. And then there's questions about the impact of the medical treatment. So when I start taking this treatment or when I continue, or even when I finish and begin to heal, what am I going to feel in my body? What is the impact of that? All of those questions can feel very overwhelming and stressful. So just a basic primer, stress 101, this may be things you already know, but I think it's helpful to kind of begin here, is that stress is your body's way of responding to a demand, right? There's something demanding and your body responds. And we all, each and every one of us, have a physical, emotional, and a mental response to stress. All three. Now, later in this presentation, I think in a couple of slides here, I'm going to ask you to kind of tune into each of those kind of segments. But just so you're thinking about it as we begin, you're responding to stress physically in your body, emotionally, what you feel, and mentally, what you think. There are different types of stress. So that word stress gets a really bad rap. But there are stress, if you think about it, think about your whole life. There are stressors that have happened to you that are really meaningful to growth and challenge and leveling up. So like you feel some degree of stress when you take a test, when you interview for a job, when you go out on a date, when you have a new conversations, when you sit down with somebody that you do care a great deal about for a hard conversation. We feel stress in those things. And that stress isn't inherently bad. Right? Not all stress is bad. There is some moments when we respond to that demand, and the stress of that helps us to be more attentive, helps us to focus, helps us to sit up on the edge of our seat, and so I want to just remind you that sometimes we feel stressed when we have to meet a demand or meet something face on that we need to do. And that stress can be really helpful. I work with some athletes in my office, and we talk about that when you stand on the starting block for a swim meet and you feel your body getting really tense and emotional, that might be gearing you up for a challenge. But if we mentally or emotionally interpret it as debilitating, then that begins to get in our way. So you can also begin to spin that when you feel your body gearing up for a challenge, that might be okay. There might be some benefit to that. And the other thing about stress, and certainly this comes up in when I work with couples or when I work in family or group situations, is that what stress is subjective. So what totally stresses me out may not bug you at all, may not even register, right? And vice versa. So sometimes in relationships, people don't always understand why something is such a quote unquote big deal or why you're upset about something, because we all understand and perceive stress differently. One of the first things I'm going to say to you today, beyond that reality check self-compassion moment, one of the way I begin all of my counseling sessions with my clients is to fine tune and to build your skill in self-awareness. If we are not tuning in to what's going on, then how in the heck are we going to take care of ourselves? So if you leave here with anything, I would hope for you to all begin to cultivate a habit of checking in with yourself. And I mean that quite logically, literally. Just, as you walk through the day, how am I doing? If there's a moment like, how am I doing here? Well, I'm feeling a bit impatient. I'm feeling restless. I'm zoning out. I'm kind of numbing out a little bit. I am feeling a buzz of energy. I can't name what that feeling is, but I can feel it in my body. I feel like a buzz. I feel really heavy and flat. I think I'm feeling dread or burnout. Just beginning to name the feelings that we're having. And if you are able to grow that feeling word vocabulary, become even more nuanced and specific about the feelings that you're having, the better able you're going to be to tend to yourself. Because we can say, I'm feeling really stressed, but we're going to do something quite different with the feeling of dread and burnout and overwhelm, as compared to if I'm feeling really stressed and I'm feeling anxious and frantic and desperate, right? Those two feelings we might abstractly label as distress, but the more nuanced and specific you can be with your feeling name, the better able you're going to figure out what to do to care for yourself. So check in with yourself, naming the feeling that you're having, growing that feeling vocabulary. Then secondly, and you might be somebody that's very tuned into this or maybe not, where are you feeling it in your body? Do you know? We feel stress in many different parts of our body. I'm going to go into that in a second, but just can you begin to pay attention? Where is this showing up in my body? Am I holding myself in a different way because of this stress? Then in that same vein of self-awareness and checking in, what am I doing in this here and now, right now, that's helpful, that's working for me? And what am I doing that's not working for me? So I'm checking in with myself and I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling exhaustion or tired. And I also am aware that I'm just scrolling mindlessly through my social media. Like I'm like losing time. That's not really helping, right? Or, I'm noticing that I'm kind of flat and low energy. And so I'm going to turn on the music. I'm going to call a friend to kind of get myself moving. What do you do that helps? You each might do different things, do you know? And what do you do that's not working for you? Self-care, so much of what I feel like I do every day in my office is talk about balance. A lot of things are balance in our lives. We're not all or nothing in anything. So in the same way that I feel people truly need to build that ability to tune in and pay attention and quiet down, and take care of their own needs and find ways that they privately and independently tend to themselves, we also have to have a capacity and a skill of reaching out and asking for help. We have to be able to do both. We have to give ourselves permission to cut ourselves a break and lower our expectations. That's compassion, right? I'm going to lower my expectations today. I'm going to cut myself a break. I'm going to be a bit gentle with myself. That's one side. And then if I'm being honest, self-care is also sometimes discipline and giving yourself a kick to get moving and to get out and to start the day and to reach out to other people. It's both. It's both. Sometimes self-care is finding calm and getting centered and getting quiet and just letting our body just kind of regulate and get grounded. And sometimes self-care is understanding, why did I get there, right? What happened? Insight and awareness. You have to be able to do both. So I've referenced this slide as we've gotten going here, but I want to just have you sit back and to think about yourselves. So I truly want you to kind of just take a moment and just think, when you are stressed, how do you recognize it? How do you notice it? Again, we all think, feel, and be, like our bodies are involved, but where do you first notice it? So I have some clients in my office who come in and they are very acutely aware of their spinning thoughts. So, right, there's a thought that's just on repeat and it's ruminating and it's keeping them awake, and they're busy brains. Their mind is going and going, and there's a lot of questions there. And they're just very aware that they can't turn off their thinker, right? I have other people who walk into my office and they just feel very emotionally fragile. Their tears are right there. They feel like sensitive in a way that they might be irritable and short, are just really teary, and they're kind of not exactly sure why, they can't grab onto why, but their feelings are right there. They're big overwhelm or big kind of dread and, tired, feeling kind of like just flat. And then I have still other people in my office who are having a hard time naming that feeling that they have. And they're maybe not as tuned into the waterfall of thoughts, but goodness, they feel like a buzz in their stomach, or their shoulders are tight, are they shaky, or they feel kind of just like nervous and restless, or they feel really heavy and tired. Do you notice, and you might, I certainly have given this talk in front of live audiences and people are like, oh, what if I'm all three of those? You are all three. We are all three of those things. But how, when you're acutely stressed, do you first notice it? Because that's a signal to you. That's your kind of white flag of, I need to tend to myself. Something's going on here. What am I needing? So strategy number one, name it to tame it. Okay, so this is all, I already have mentioned this strategy. I'm going to kind of go through these bullets, but we've already kind of been here in that first slide where I encouraged you to cultivate a habit of checking in with yourself. The second thing I said was to begin to name the feeling. That when we name it, when we say, I am feeling anxious, or I am feeling worry, I am feeling dread, I am feeling irritable, whatever it is, that we immediately begin to make some space between having the feeling and being the feeling, right? That when we're experiencing it, it can be all encompassing, and we're kind of just like, ooh, washing over. That wave is kind of just like washing over us. But as soon as we name it, you kind of create some distance there. And in that distance, it gives you some space where you're able to get back in the driver's seat and respond to that feeling. Suddenly it's not, Julie is overwhelmed. Julie is feeling overwhelmed, and Julie has an option to take some responsibility for that and to care for myself in some way, right? So just naming the feeling gives you a little distance to that and gives you some choice and some room to move. I think also it's important to say, and frankly, you're all living this and walking this every day, so you inherently know this, is that your fear and your worry, your discomfort isn't necessarily going to go away, right? So people also walk into my office feeling some unsettledness or some distress, thinking that by starting therapy or going to a support group or getting whatever, that's going to magically go away. And then we're all going to be good. Well, that's not true, right? That what we're wanting to learn to do, the goal is to not have all that feeling go away. I mean, that would be lovely, but it's not realistic. That the goal is to learn how to surf it. The goal is to learn how to, when you feel a big feeling or when you feel overwhelmed and something's overwhelming, that you know how to surf it. And this can happen when you're sitting at work. So you got to go to work and you've got to maintain some professional presence. You have to be able to keep it together to walk into a meeting or to get your job done and to function and to be productive, right? So how are you going to tend to it and take care of yourself so that you don't let that feeling or that emotional moment take over, right? And so when we name a feeling, it also, that space that we're creating, gives us the ability to build some degree of tolerance for something that's uncomfortable or unsettling. Like, this can live over here in the background while I also get to the business of these 5 things I have to do today, right? I'm not ignoring it. I'm not dismissing it. I'm acknowledging it, that I today feel a little worry. Worry is there. And I've got a test, or I've got a scan, I've got a doctor's appointment coming up later this week, and that's sitting with me and it's there, but I also have to do this today. So it's saying I can have both, or that can live in the background while I turn my attention and my focus to what's in front of me. It begins when you name it and you say, oh, it's there. It begins to help you build that tolerance and be more flexible with your attention. Taking the hit of the feeling. So I think sometimes if we don't name a feeling, we're trying to pull the wool over our own eyes that it's not there, right? I'm fine. I'm stiff upper lip, or pull up my bootstraps, or kind of soldier on, right? But when we name it, we're able to say, okay, this is there. Therefore, I'm not at my top today, but what's within my control? What can I do despite the fact that this feeling is here? I think the other thing, name it and tame it, is that, and you remember that scale that I had where a lot of self-care is balance. Sometimes it's important to gather insight around why this is happening, but more often than not, the best first step is to get calm. We sometimes skip that step when we try to go to analyzing and processing what's going on for ourselves. And that's even in work, like when you feel something and you're reactive, why is this happening? Well, this person did this and this person did this, blah, 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 blah. First, before we jump, before we react, let's get calm so that your brain's back on gear, and then we can think about it, right? So that might be another thing to start to challenge yourself, is to not impulsively react to a feeling, but to first take a first step in getting calm. When you get calm, you not only feel better, but you're going to act smarter. Your brain's back online, right? So getting calm is a lot of times maybe the first step after you name that feeling. What I need to do next is to get calm. Well, what are my options there? Okay, so here you are at work, you've been hit by a feeling, you've named it, you know it, you see it. What do I do with that? I would say get calm. Get back to your present right now. A lot of fear and worry and big feelings are flashing us forward. A lot of regret and guilt and sadness and shame and hurt is sometimes replaying and reworking things that have happened in our past, right? So all of that is floating up here in our mind. It's making us feel whatever we're feeling. And we've got to focus on right now. So use your 5 senses to bring yourself back. So one strategy is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So name 5 things that you see. So you're really having an emotional moment. You're reactive, right? And you know it. And so you're going to take some responsibility to care for yourself. And step 1 is to take care. I'm going to step away and I'm going to name 5 things I see. I'm just going to take a moment, and I can see the cars on the street. I can see my lamp. I can see a pillow. I can see a teapot. I can see some Kleenex, right? See is very easy. Here, I can hear my sound machine outside. I hear a car on the street. I can hear the tick of the clock. Okay, so also easy, but it made me slow down a little bit more. Did you see that? 3 things that I feel, not emotionally, physically feel. My office is a little cold, so I feel the chill. I can feel this fabric of this shirt on my skin. I can feel the floor under my feet. 2 and 1 are smell and taste, which are both harder. But as you do this, what you should be noticing is that it's really requiring some attention, right? I am not able to think about my what if, because what I am trying to do is to tune into my right now. So it slows us down and it brings our attention right here to this moment, which begins to help us to feel a bit more calm. You can connect breathing to that, but when you're breathing, I would want you to really think about what's happening in that breath. Another way to break down into here, now I'm going to skip to that bottom point on this slide first, and then I'll go back up. People talk about getting grounded. I think that's kind of vague. Do you know what that means? And Janet, I just saw your chat there, and I can absolutely repeat that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give me 1 second. But grounding techniques. So, sometimes when we're lost in our thoughts or our feelings, that we are so focused here that we're completely disconnected with what's in front of you. So eye contact brings you back, right? Brings you back in that moment so that we're not Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for putting that in the chat. Janet, I don't know if you saw that, but bring your eye contact. That's going to ground you. It's going to bring you back. That changing location. So we might be feeling really unsettled and very like just uneasy. And then just if you're sitting, stand up and move, stand up and move. And that might break that moment for you. If you're inside, go outside for a minute and breathe that air and kind of pop that bubble. If you're outside, just walk in, just kind of move rooms within your office. Go take a trip lap around the hall, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, those things. If you shift your physical location, sometimes that can pop the bubble. Does that make sense when I say pop the bubble? Like I can truly feel that. A lot of times I feel that in my office when I'm in a session. We can be really deep into a conversation. We might even feel it even in this webinar right now. We're right here and we're deep. And then the hour's over and I open up the door and gosh, the whole gigantic world out here. Like there's all this other movement and action that when we're in the spin of our emotion, popping that bubble, move location, it might help you to get grounded. Get your actual feet on the ground. Put your hands on your body. So put your hands on your thighs, give yourself a hug. All of those things are going to help you to engage what we call your parasympathetic nervous system, and that slows your body down. I worked with a man once who was coming to me he was feeling a lot of anxiety and stress around his wife's diagnosis, right? And part where that was really interrupting his work. It was coming up for him a lot of times in meetings at work. For some reason, he was having a hard time staying focused and concentrating on the conversations, and all this fear and worry would show up. And so we talked about these grounding techniques. And I said, get your roll between your toes and your heels, get your feet on the ground, put your hands on your thighs. He's like, are you serious? Do you seriously think that is going to do it for me when I'm that overwhelmed? And he came back the next week and he's like, it does. Like it helped me to really feel like I was in that moment opposed to floating away into my train of terribles. So just watch what works for you as far as getting grounded, getting back in your moment. Okay, now I'm going to pop back up into this. So strategy 2 is break time into manageable chunks. I'm sure you've heard that before. Sometimes our stress and our overwhelm makes it very difficult to know where to begin. If you're feeling any degree of anxiety or clinical depression, which I'm going to say the word clinical because we throw those two words around quite a lot, but they are an actual diagnosis, right? And come with different symptoms. And so if you're actually feeling that, then motivation and decision-making really get impaired and are hard if you're anxious or depressed. So it's hard to know how to begin. So a lot of times, even in my office, as we talk about strategies, it's what is the very next step, the absolute next thing that you're going to do, right? What is that? Just do that. And then maybe you can think about 3. I don't know. You tell me what works for you. Manageable chunks might also mean time. So I'm only going to think about till lunch. That's it. Like you wake up in the morning, like, I don't know how I'm going to make it through this day. Or like, I don't know how I'm going to get all the way to Friday's appointment. Nope. We're just going to do today now till lunch. And then once I get to lunch, then I'm going to give myself permission to get to dinner. And then after dinner, I'm going to give myself permission to get to bedtime. That's the only way I'm going to do it. And every time my brain starts to pull me into that, I'm going to say, nope, we're going to stay here. Okay. This one I love, sort your thoughts into past, present, and future. If you're tuning into that waterfall of thinking, some of your thoughts might be future, past, present, right? Give all of your future thoughts to your future self. Can you register a vote of confidence for your future self, that if that were to happen, or when we get there, my future self will know what to do, but that is not on my plate today. So just relinquish it, give it over to your future self. There are many times since I've kind of been using this in my practice where even in my own personal life, I'm like, that is for my future self. I will let my future self take that over. So you can give that to them. Okay. And then there are some other things that are going to come up in the next couple of slides, but that should help you to kind of get here and now. If there are more things, I'm seeing that our chat is starting to blow up and I'm loving that. If there are more things that come up to you that you use and you find really helpful, share them with our friends in the chat. I think that you guys are often sometimes the best support to one another. You're walking this and you're doing this. What do you notice? So put those things in the chat. Let's help each other. Okay. Strategy number Is it strategy number 3? Are we already on strategy number 3? Yeah. Okay. Strategy number 3, educate yourself. So I guess I've come to believe and observe that so often our anxiousness and our worry are, at the end of the day, an unanswered question. And sometimes we can get answers to those questions, right? We're just spinning with it. And it would be helpful to kind of get the answers. The internet is not all bad. It's got some scary, dark, twisty places, for sure, but it's not all bad. So sometimes it can be helpful to just look your worry square in the eye and try to figure out what are you not knowing? Are you not knowing, or what worst case scenarios are you creating in your head, and are they accurate? Do you have information that supports that worst case scenario, or actually do you have questions that if you got answers for might debunk it? So gather some information, maybe on your treatment plan, maybe on the options available to you at work, maybe on how other people have been managed or handled around other health related issues at work. I don't know. Get some answers to your questions. See if you can find them. And as you research and as you begin to learn more, Erica, I love your comment there about having a partner or someone else do the internet search for you and share their filtered version. That's got to be, obviously, that's somebody that you trust, but what a wonderful way to protect yourself, right? To say like, oh gosh, if I'm being really honest, I have a tendency to go down a dark rabbit hole here. And then I find that I'm kind of unsettled for a number of times. So that's not safe for me. But this other person, if I tell them what I'm thinking, what I'm worrying, they research it and they give me really great information. That's really great strategy. Record your personal side effects to guide your work expectations. So what are you learning? What are you figuring out for yourself? So not only are you going to gain information from outside resources, right? Your medical team, your workplace, but you're also going to gain answers to your question by your self-observation. Like as you walk this journey, you become increasingly knowledgeable and savvy about, you are not the same as when you began. You know so much more. So you know what this looks like. You know what you need when you walk into a doctor's appointment. You know what you might need when you come into your workplace. You know who's good to talk to and responds to you in ways that are helpful and who does not. So begin to pay attention to your own knowledge and wisdom, right? Meet with other survivors. So you are all, and that's why I'm watching, you guys took me up on it and you're sharing with each other. Thank you. But you are also one of the most valuable resources to one another, right? And I find that peer-to-peer support is fantastic because you're connecting and you're talking with people who are walking the walk. Like, oh my gosh, I went to work and I had this, oh, me too. I had the same thing. And I found that when I kind of articulated my needs in this way, it was more helpful and more productive than when I went in with all of the things that weren't working for me. So, using each other in ways to kind of help navigate this is such a powerful, powerful resource. If you are connected to a support group, you might be vigorously nodding your head. If you've yet to have that opportunity, or you've questioned if it's the right thing for you, just explore what's out there. There might be things locally for you, or there may not, but there are so many national organizations and so many different ways to connect. And it may be things like this, which is not a formal support group, but obviously people right here understand you. It might be conferences, it might be educational things. There are many different ways in which you find other survivors. And in that, maybe the beauty of a connection that gives you something to hold on to. With regard to work and what's available, what your options are, truly educate, not unlike your diagnosis, educate yourself on your rights and your options, who to talk to, how you gather information, who do you go to and who do you not, as you begin to figure out how to work through a diagnosis or how to take some time away and what your options are. In the land of getting self-awareness and understanding, do you know what your triggers are? This is going to be a pretty quick slide because it's your work, not mine. You've got to begin to pay attention to what are those things out there in the world that make me spin. are knock me off balance, are kind of take the wind out of my sails. And that might make you irritable and angry. Certain topics of conversations might make you feel defensive or protective, or, I know that sometimes people talk about, hearing when other people say, well, why aren't you doing this? Because my neighbor did this. I don't understand why your doctors wouldn't be doing X, Y, and Z. That could make you feel, that could be a trigger for some, questioning what your choices are. Dates on the calendar are often a very normal trigger, and it may be a specific date of an anniversary. It may be a time of year. I remember sitting with somebody in my office once, and she really was really having a hard time nailing down what was leaving her kind of foggy and just not really engaged and connected in her life. And she's like, it's so much that's going really well. And I think I've given myself a lot of grace around these other things, but I'm just not myself. Why? And as we kind of began to talk more, and there were probably many things, it's never just one, but she was aware that the change of the season was just taking her back to when she was first experiencing symptoms and first beginning to have this nagging worry and fear that something was wrong that ultimately led to her diagnosis. And so just the change in the light in the season was what was affecting her. That can be a trigger. People, right? So certain people are just tricky and hard, and they can become a trigger. So the purpose of knowing your triggers is that you take care of yourself, right? We can't necessarily change a trigger. We can't control the outside world, but we can take back control ourselves, right? So knowing, okay, I'm walking into this room and it's filled with a bunch of people that never say the right thing. So I've got to manage my expectations, B, maybe watch my time limit for this interaction. And I've got to kind of give myself permission to take breaks, right? So, or, it's this time of year, and historically I get a kind of tender around this time. So I'm going to be really diligent about getting to bed on time, about making sure I'm connected to other people, making sure that I'm thinking and noticing my feelings so that I'm calm and grounded, so that when you are in the presence of a trigger, you can begin to tend to yourself. All right. Smooth communication. So workplace stress is a lot of times, or can be related to others, the relationships that we're in at work, whether those are colleagues or our supervisor, or, HR, whomever it might be, that figuring out who and how to talk to people can be a great strategy to kind of spend some private time on, so that when you're in the presence of that moment, you're ready, you're geared up and you're ready. So consider, when you think about how you're doing, or what you're needing, or what you're asking, what your request might be, if that's a communication thing. Consider your support network. Who's the best audience for that need today? Do you get what you need from everyone, or do you need to kind of be more thoughtful or more intentional with who you turn to for different things? That's sometimes something that we don't spend a lot of time thinking about. And then we feel hurt when people don't respond to us in the way that we need, or they have a kind of dismissive or a vague, absent response, right? Who does respond to you correctly? Who wants to jump in and care for you, but might need direction, right? So, or who at work might have the answers that I need, so that I'm not, ricocheting around to a number of different people. Create and rehearse simple responses for awkward or tricky interactions. So you may feel very comfortable talking about your diagnosis and all that's going on for you, and that might be not something that you think about too much. Or you might be someone that you would rather keep some things kind of close to the chest and private, and yet your diagnosis in some way is known, whether that's physically or physical appearance has changed, or people do know. And what are you going to say when people check in and you're not necessarily in a place to respond? So begin to create some simple responses for those interactions that you've got at the ready. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Have conversation, and that could be what I call a conversation changer. So something that kind of redirects the conversation. Cancer and Careers often calls that the swivel. If you've heard in other workshops and webinars that they do, how can you swivel the conversation in a way that works better for you? Begin to pay attention. This is kind of, leaning back on that trigger conversation. Begin to pay attention to the topics are the places that feel sensitive to you, where you either clam up, get protective, get defensive. What is it about? Where is that happening? And what are you needing in those things that you're not getting or that you might need to meet for yourself? Talking about cancer can be complicated, right? So there is not a steadfast, hard and fast rule here. This is not black or white, because some days you might feel very at ease and confident, and other days more fragile and private, and you are allowed to change. So it's wise to have some strategies on both sides of that so that you can maneuver that. I think another thing is that no conversation is a done deal. So you can always circle back and say, we talked about this the other day and I hadn't given it a lot of thought. Or since our conversation, I've thought about this more. And you can always, conversations are an ongoing dialogue. Now that I'm further along in my treatment, I have more information, and I think that this is something that I want to revisit. So just remember that you can always circle up in those things. So I said I was going to talk about this. Here's this other conversation, this other kind of strategy. I call it stop, shift, stabilize, 3 S's. Again, Cancer and Career often talks about it as a swivel, another S. But when somebody is coming at you again and again, and they're not getting the message that this is really not something you want to talk about in the workplace, or maybe just today, you may truly need to assert a boundary and stop. So, usually I'm fine talking about my diagnosis, but today I just need to focus on other things. You may need to say a statement that definitively stops, right? And you can do that in whatever way feels right for you. I've given 2 ideas, but you need to make it work for you. Oh, goodness. Kind of make it be, oh, goodness, I'm so sick and tired of talking about my cancer. Let's just talk about something else, today, something more interesting. That tells me definitively, I'm not going here today, right? Done. Stop sign. Now, unfortunately, after you do that, the spotlight is still on you. People are still looking at you like, okay, got that, but now what? So it's your job to shift it. It's your job to figure out where we're going. What's the map? Where are we going? So then you got to have it. You're ready. I hear you're planning a summer vacation. Tell me more about it. Or, you're just telling me about your son's little league team. What was going on there? Or have you started this project yet for work? Or do you know who we're supposed to follow up with about this? You've got to circle it. So then let somebody else begin to talk about themselves or talk about something else. And then after that hard work is done, because that's hard, let's be honest, that's hard work. It's really easy to talk about right now. It's hard to execute on that. Then when the attention is safely off of you, I would say get that calm that we keep talking about, right? Because that's going to leave you feeling something, and it might be a bit unsettled. It might be a bit, tense. So then in that moment, I want you to take a deep breath, get your feet on the ground, and get quiet and calm, right? Intentional boundaries. And I'm going to kind of fly here a little bit through my last few slides, just because I want to make sure that if there are some questions, I noticed that there's a few in there that we can get to those things too. But boundaries are an important part of caring for yourself. I always think of boundaries as a hug, right? It's important to keep them. And another phrase I love about boundaries is choosing discomfort over regret, right? Because setting a boundary is not comfortable. Saying no, saying that's not okay, saying stop, whatever that is. Setting that boundary is not always a comfortable moment, but you know that you didn't do it when down the road you're annoyed and you're regretting and you're just over it, like, oh, I just don't want to be doing this. That means that you've tripped over your boundary, right? So when we have strong boundaries, it leads to more confidence, emotional stability, reduced anxiety, and a stronger sense of control over ourselves. Clear boundaries define what's your responsibility and what's your responsibility and what's someone else's responsibility, right? So there can be emotional boundaries when somebody keeps kind of coming at you and you don't want to do that work to take care of them. That's their work, not yours. You set that boundary, right? There can be workload and responsibility boundaries. This is mine, this is yours. So there can be mental amount boundaries, so when you think about work, what is the most important, sit back Think of your job description. Think of who you are in that system. What is the most important part of your job, of your work, right? That's your bucket, right? Sometimes we can get really lost in responding to all of these emails and doing all of this stuff when really my job is this, but I am so busy doing all this extra stuff over here that I'm not getting space and time to do this. We need to set better boundaries here so that I can do this. Or I need to set better boundaries for my energy level. And this is what is the most important thing. So I need to I need to hit here first, and then whatever I have left, I can get to these other things. Get clear on your optimal work style. So how do you work best? Do you work best kind of like, rolling with punches and going with everything in the way that it comes at you and kind of spinning and collaborative and all that? Or do you work best like solo in your workspace? Do you do your things? Do you need to carve out that space and time where you can focus? How do you work? What's the best way for others to communicate with you? So should they email you? Should they text you? Should they call you? I've had people talk to me about, text just inundating them. And that's very disorganizing, or it's hard to organize when they've got emails, all different kinds of things. So what's the best way for others to communicate and to come to you? And then mostly with boundaries, you're going to have a moment of like check in on when fear is pushing at your effort to assert your boundaries, to set them. So what I mean by that is, if I don't do this, I'm going to get in trouble, or if people will not see me as accountable and responsible. There's a fear there. And so I would challenge that and check and see if it's really true. So when a fear is pushing at your ability to test a boundary, that might be a moment to slow down and watch and check in and to see if that's actually true. Because if it wasn't true, then you're better able to set a boundary. These are some just very simple strategies that have been proven. There's research around that help. That help with work, that work at work. So do someone a favor. That always kind of turns our mood around. It changes the stress level. It kind of back to that breaks a bubble. It kind of like brings some levity into a situation that could feel heavy and tense. Get organized. There are times when I come into my work day and I'm like, holy cow, I've got a lot to do. And the first thing I do is just kind of get my desk neat. And for some reason, the whole day feels better. So just getting your desk neat or getting it organized sometimes is a very calming and very helpful, helps bring some clarity. Hide your phone. Don't let that keep pulling at you. Disappear for a bit. Sometimes just taking a little bit of a break and where nobody can get to you for a moment kind of helps you kind of feel fresh and come back with some perspective. Stay hydrated. I've got something on that coming up. Avoid conflict, right? So sometimes work is filled with commiserating and there can be benefit in that and finding and normalizing and connecting. But when you know that we're tipping the scale and it's beginning to get a bit, kind of workplace drama-y, I'd back on out of that. It's draining you of energy and it may not have any benefit to you, right? And then this is my absolute favorite, and I could preach this every day. End your day like you mean it. It is okay if you collapse onto the couch and watch TV at night or do what you need to do. Just be intentional about it. Name it. Like, now is my time that I'm going to put on my cozy clothes and I'm going to go watch a show. Like, just really give it to yourself as a tool of self-care. Be intentional about it as opposed to mindlessly numbing and kind of just falling into the couch. Say, I've done the things I'm going to do. I'm going to go change my clothes and I'm going to go watch a show for this amount of time. Just be intentional about it. My final note, and then we'll see what some Q&As are out there, is that we are talking about all different kinds of strategies and some different ways of thinking about things and communication, which are a lot of skills that you can learn and you can strengthen and you can build. But one of the most important aspects of your well-being are very basic things. So sleep. That you feel different if you're not well rested. So if you're having a crappy day or a hard time, one of the first things that you might be able to do to take care of yourself is get to bed on time. And when you go to bed on time and you begin to watch your sleep, begin to notice if that changes how you're doing, right? So that's when people say to me, there's nothing within my control and all of these things, these stressors are outside of you do have control of taking care of your body in these ways, staying nourished and hydrated, right? Other things that help us to feel differently are a sense of connection and belonging. So who is it that you can connect to and just talk and find joy for just joy's sake, not because you wanted it, but just, I'm doing this for no other reason than I have fun with it. And somebody wrote knitting up there, there's, unless you truly definitely 100% need a scarf or a blanket, right? But sometimes knitting is just for the joy and the calm of doing it, right? There's not a deadline, or you don't have to say, just do something that you just love to do, just to do it because you love it. Acknowledge it, being acknowledged and valued. So often the volume of what's not working or what's stressful is the loudest in the room. And sometimes the homework that I give my clients is this week or between now and the next time I see you, I just want you to tune in or just pay close attention to those moments when somebody notices you. And maybe it's words and verbal affirmations, and maybe it's a look. Maybe it's they brighten when you walk in the room. Maybe it's that somebody says thank you to something that you've done. Watch for that. Sometimes we just don't even pay attention, and we need those things. So those things are all ways that we can care for ourselves too. Scott, that's my last slide. And boy, we are right on time, but I don't know if there is a Q&A or if there's a question out there that we covered a lot, but something that might be burning.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm just gonna share my screen real quick.
Do I need to stop share?
No, we're good.
Okay.
So I just want to make everyone aware of a few upcoming events we have. We have another webinar in 2 weeks on February 8th for making key decisions. You can see all the webinars for the year on our website. Our Midwest conference is on Friday, March 24th. It's an all-day conference virtually on Zoom with lots of different presentations and panels, and you can find more information about that on our website. And then we also have our national conference coming up on June 23rd. And again, all of those are free to register, and we hope that we will see you there for it. Now, I'm going to leave the CE requirements up here again for anyone who needs that. You'll be getting an email tomorrow with the post-test and the eval. Any questions you have, feel free to shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org. And if we don't get to your question today because we are running out of time a little bit, please shoot us an email. We have social workers and trained staff who can answer all of your questions. And so cancerandcareers@cew.org is the email. Now, Julie, the first question I have here is, it's exhausting to manage feelings day in and day out long term. What can we do when we're in this situation for the long haul?
So I think that that's honest. I hear you. I agree with you. I understand that can be really tricky. So we're going to go back to that very first slide of reality check moment. This is exhausting and it's hard and it takes work. I am so not a toxic positivity person, right? It makes me like cringe, that idea of like, oh, but chin up, buttercup, right? I think we do have to acknowledge when we're not feeling well and when we're hurt, when we're struggling, or when things are exhausting and hard. At the same time, if we get stuck there, that's not really helping ourselves either, right? So think of feelings and emotions as a circle. Acknowledge it, name it, greet it like a visitor. When I said that on my slide, greet it like a visitor. Today, I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling impatient. And then what's my very next step? So where do I have control? What can I do right now that might help me to make it just a little bit better? Not the long haul. Let's walk away from the long haul. Remember that note I also had about your future self? Let's give some of this to your future self. But today, what can you do between now and the next moment? What's the very next thing?
I love that. Here's another one. How do you handle caregiver stress and not putting that on the person we're caring for?
How do you have, caregivers? Well, stress is stress. So hopefully, first of all, if you are a caregiver that's walked into this room, I really hope that much of what I said resonated for you too, that your worry and your overwhelm and your sadness and concern, that is very, very important. And it is honest and it is real. And it is in many ways, we're not having a contest, right? So you have to also find those ways to care for yourself. If the person that you're caring for, your patient, your loved one, is kind of your inner circle, your main person, it may be wise to talk to, let's give them a benefit of the doubt, I think, too, and just ask them, I'm having some of these feelings and I don't know, I'm having a hard time knowing when to turn to you for comfort and when that's too much. And then who else is available to you? Do you have other friends that might be able to listen and to hear you and to kind of respond? Is this the time to engage a therapist, right? Someone as professional support. And the medical team at the hospital where your loved one is being treated would be able to provide those resources for a caregiver as well. There are caregiver support groups where you can walk into a room of other caregivers who can understand and hear that dynamic too. But sometimes it is helpful to give that person that you're caring for the option to care for you, because they might be feeling like, why do you never come to me more? There's something different that's changed in our relationship because you're being hesitant. And I still want to love you and I still want to care for you. So go there first, but then also explore those other alternatives too.
I should say also, we did a session in December last month on caregivers specifically, and I'm going to have Tatiana or Sissy drop a link in the chat for where you can get that recording. We also have one coming up. It's not until November this year, but we do have an upcoming session about caregiving. And then I think this is going to be our last question. Again, if we didn't get to your question, please shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org. We'll be happy to answer everything one-on-one that we don't get to today. The last question is, can you elaborate on the what's happening in the breath question or statement?
Oh, okay. So when I said, if you take deep breaths as a way to ground yourself, pay attention to your breath, I think that sometimes we do that and we just breathe, inhale and exhale. But if you really pay attention to the sensation of breathing, right? And a way to do that, because that can feel abstract. Does anybody know about square breathing? Square breathing is when you draw a square in front of you and your verticals are your in and your out and your horizontals are holds. So you inhale for 4, hold, exhale for 4, hold, right? So there's my square. And in that inhale, feel your lungs and your diaphragm expand and change, and holding that way that fills you up and feels a little bit more tense. And then as you exhale, feel the air coming out of your nostril and how that kind of begins to slow and calm your whole pulse rate and everything down. So just paying attention to physiologically what's happening when you breathe.
Absolutely. Well, Julie, thank you so much for this. It was wonderful, and thank you all for joining us. We hope we'll see you soon. Again, we have one next 2 weeks from now on February 8th for making key decisions. So we hope we'll see you there. Thank you again, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining. Wishing you well.
Take care.